J'invite maintenant Tom SCHROEDER, réalisateur de Sparrow's Flight. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Marcel.
Do you consider yourself as an animator or as a documentary filmmaker?
Yeah. Well, both. It seems I've been interested. I mean, when you mentioned the Hubleys, they were one of the first people that I saw that were making, I would guess what you'd call animated documentaries of their children. They recorded documentary footage of their children and animated to that. So when I was young, that was an inspiration to me. A film I made in 2000, Bike Ride, which I know you're familiar with, was the first sort of documentary audio footage film that I made. And now it's become very common. I think there was a notion at one time that there was a contradiction between animation and documentary, that somehow the subjectivity or intervention or the way that animated films were made was contradictory to the notion of a documentary. But now it's a very prevalent notion in the animation world. There's festivals that have documentary programs. I think there's festivals that are entirely dedicated to documentary films. But as I get older, I'm more interested in the documentary aspect of making films, animated films, with documentary materials.
The Sparrow's Flight is a film with material that come from different time of your life. So
yes.
You're somebody who keeps everything, all the old tests and things like this?
Yeah, I mean, not in a very organized way. The first part of making this film, my friend died 7 years ago, and all of his materials, when you die, suddenly you just leave everything in a mess in boxes. And so it was sorting through all of his materials to see what was there. And then I found all of the Super 8 footage, Super 8 film footage that we shot 30 years ago in the barn that you see as the center of the film. And then it's just, the film starts with those materials and then sort of gets improvised out from that center. But I'm not a very organized archivist, if that was your question. It just all exists, and then the first part of making a film like this is the research aspect of just seeing what's there, and then what kind of film could you make out of it. The intention being a tribute to my friend. I mean, to the sensibility of my friend, to my relationship that I had with him, a reflection as a middle-aged man now upon youth, and then the distance from youth and what that means. So all of those themes emerge from the relationship of working with those materials.
Your friend died 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So did you have the idea of this film a long time ago, or it came recently?
Well, I think that it's important. I think when he died, I knew I wanted to make a film about him. But whenever there's something that you're very close to emotionally, I feel like it's important to have some time, to some distance from it, to be a little more objective about structuring the film. So I waited 6 years from that point to start making the film, and then it took about a year to make it.
Is it the most personal film you did since the beginning of your career?
You know, I was talking to Igor Kovalyev about this yesterday. I think everybody makes films that are very personal, whether they're overtly personal or not. People are investing the contents of their life in them. The Marcel King of Tervuren film, which is about you and your son and your relationship, yeah. Of course. That's a film that had to do with just marrying a Belgian, and suddenly spending a lot of time around Brussels and meeting the people that were there and had their roosters and hearing their stories. So I think that for me, I just make films that are obviously about things that are happening in my life that is interesting, but I think that every filmmaker, whether you're adapting, say, someone else's written material, you're still investing the personal contents of your life in it, especially in the animation world where you're so intimately acquainted with every frame that's being executed. But this film, it should be said, this is the first time that I've seen it with an audience. It's probably the most, yeah, it's really the premiere of the film. it's the largest, most intimidating, probably most prestigious venue in the world for an animated film. So I was quite terrified just how it would play, because it's rather long and obscure and very personal. And if it works for an audience, it will work on the level that people would have an identification with the experience of loving someone, they die, they're gone. What do you do with the empty space that's left behind? And I hope that that would translate in some capacity, but I don't know for sure.
Questions from the audience? Bernard Genet.
Oui, à plusieurs reprises dans votre film, on entend la réplique Salut le néant, fais ton sale boulot. Je voulais savoir si c'était une réplique qu'avait prononcée votre ami en se voyant mourir.
The original story content for the film that we were making in the barn that's in the black and white film of flying in the film, the content is from the Venerable Bede, who's a 6th century religious philosopher. And the parable of the sparrow, that nothingness actually comes from the religious philosopher, the Venerable Bede. It's not my friend.
Pierre-Yves?
Donc, j'ai que des compliments à faire sur votre film. Et peut-être que je me suis gouré, mais j'ai eu l'impression de voir le nom de la personne, de votre ami au générique de la trame sonore, mais peut-être, probablement que je me suis fourvoyé. Je me demandais, dans la construction de la trame sonore, est-ce que vous avez utilisé aussi des archives de même principe que l'image, ou ça a été fait comme dans le processus? Pouvez-vous nous expliquer un peu comment ça a été fait, quoi?
Yes, my friend Dave has the credit as the credit of the artistic design or direction, artistic director of the film. So essentially, I'm using his materials in the film, and I'm animating with design files that he produced. In addition, he was my closest collaborator in my life, and he was the drummer in the jazz group that I play guitar in as well. So all of the music that you hear in the film is also from our years of playing. And then I do the sound design for my films as well. I worked with a sound designer who's very good, who Rosto, the famous Dutch animator, works with. So he's a very high-level person, but he thinks in a very concrete way. And I decided I wanted something more abstract and poetic for sound-wise, so I just did it myself. And I had a great deal of pleasure in designing the sound with all of again, with a lot of found materials. And then, but the one interesting note. Hello, Karin. Goedemorgen. The artistic director of the Melbourne Animation Festival, Malcolm Turner, I sent him the film before it was finished, really, in my mind, asking for his opinion, because he's someone that I respect his opinion. And he said, it's already very close to being done. He gave me some suggestions, but he said, I really like this film. I'd like to commission you to design the poster and the trailer for my 2017 festival, and have you do a retrospective program, bring you down. But he said, I'd like you to design it with your friend Dave. So Dave will have a design credit from beyond the grave, from the dead. So it's, I'm creating a new genre of collaborating with the dead. I hope. I hope it catches on like the documentary film. Collaborating with the dead will be a new genre of animated film.
Martin?
Actually, had been interested in asking about the music as well. Normally when you're constructing the soundtrack for a film, you'll be driven by the picture, and you'll create sounds that will complement. In this case, it was obvious that you were using music that you and Dave had both collaborated on with other people earlier. So did you find that that was a different process in terms of designing the sound? Because you were taking two previously created images and creating a collage, if you will, between the two.
Collage is the appropriate word. It's just there's a set of all these found materials that exist. And the virtue of having no budget, essentially, as independent animators in America, we don't really have government funding to make films. I do commercials to finance my films, essentially, and get a little bit of foundation money. The virtue of doing almost everything yourself is that it's a very improvisational process. Everything existing in the digital realm, it feeds back and forth. so that I'm working on the sound at the same time that I'm working on the picture, and ideas will arise out of how the sound interacts with the picture, and then the picture in turn develops, and then you do more sound design after that fact. So it's a continual back and forth process that's really satisfying and allows for a lot of improvisation.
Did you find any of the normal functions of film music, the representation of the emotion of the scene or the characters, you know, in terms of either elation or sorrow, like was something that was more difficult to achieve if you decided that the music was simply going to be materials that you and David created?
That's an interesting question. I probably didn't think that consciously about it. It's more intuitive. I would say, for example, there's the kind of fake documentary within the film about the making of the original old film.
Yeah.
And I hired a kind of industrial film voiceover guy, an old guy who did that authoritative voice. The music that I put behind that, I chose a kind of more conventional jazz standard sort of feel, and EQ'd it in such a way that it felt like an industrial film 16mm print that would have been projected in a classroom when I was a child. So there's some choices that they would be more diegetic versus non-diegetic sound in that film language way, but a lot of it is really just intuitive.
Right.
The choices.
Trying to recreate the sound of an industrial documentary isn't exactly setting the bar real high.
No, right, but it's fun.
Yeah.
This kind of fun is fun for animators.
Thank you.
Tom SCHROEDER, thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcel.